Noon. Welcome to our Headliners Newsmaker at the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Poonam Sharma, the Membership Secretary of the National Press Club and the founder and editor of Global Strategy. Imagine an election in which more than 77% of eligible voters participated. Then imagine those voters spread across 30 different countries. And finally, imagine them voting for a government in exile. Our guest today, the democratically elected leader of the Central Tibetan Administration, the Tibetan government in exile, doesn't have to imagine it because that is what happened in 2021 when Penpa Tsering was elected as Sikyong. Sikyong Penpa Tsering was sworn in on May 27th, 2021 at an official ceremony graced by His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Tibet Tibet 줄고 사표변인가 의미미 뒤쪽에 시경 뱀바스라 아니 아메리카 게서 워싱턴도 유베 개용 sargo tunzo ya ta pöton ko tamsha na ya ta ta nga zu si si di geyon sargo tunzo pege ani ko pa basir la tu ngo zhe shu du da zo di mi pöbe mangzo lemru di to ne si jong udu shudan kan de yime lakbar du da geka mangu shu chi na pimi kha dam de yo re ani ni do nyusek ji lo ya ani pimi 망보 슈지기 외도제 시경 두스페르스 제제도 손수다 개연 살고 tun소세야 돼 내가 첨부시래 비게 아메리게 나로리아 따직 시든다 데베톤에 지다 첨부인데 나 여바다 야 믹세 군주변의 계급이 오틸 속바 디데 망보 체도가제 개연 살고 tun소 비게 페이지 고야 담세나야다 살고 링게 조틀나야 된데 얘기 로소 유럽변의 차샤비나 개연 살고 tun소 디나리에 진호 혼스kem 보지 무초 아무 집유나요레 조틀나야다 된다리아 안 다나시 단도 믹스 구접 대보 그래서 결론을 얘기하라 콘스kem 보지 무초 믹스 구접 원토네 표제 데메기 다 레든 벤시보다 딘데기 토네 표게 페나요레 다나시 니돈 죽지글로리아 아니 시수 로산생게라 표게 페요레 엔타레다 시조 뱀버슬라제도 스레세 당고랑 아주 비게 시조 뱀버슬라 담셰데 운조네게 동안 아주 디직 생긴다.
States is a very important partner for Tibet. The United States is the only country that has a law on Tibet, the Tibet Policy Act of 2002, which has been amended to Tibet Policy and Support Act of 2020.
단다 시조 뱀버슬라기 소야 될다 아메리카의 내가 친구 수차디어 점블링디 나기다 주조다 시조 망부지 예배나네 즉 표현의 데베토리아 아메리카의 계급이 라타 제약이 팀 유럽의 아메리카 지구를 배나 니돈 유스탄벨로기다 표현의 팀이 아메리카의 신진이 차단하제 다 계급이 라타 제약이 팀이 차대어 배나 계급이 라타 제약 팀이 저 주조의 템베처 팀 강시 아니 진종원의 라다나고 진종원의 라다나바 마체 아니 배나 디 네트워크 개체종으로 봐베 즉 다와 투투를 참 약하시 다와 숨참 디델리아 디데기 토네 배나 대생 가리드 다와요 디데기 토네 주소를 인슈 표고라 다나시 아메리카 차샤비나 믹스 디두 구섭 슝랑게 표현 토리아 믹스 디두 구섭 용에디 다 아메리카 슝지고 두스차데어레 드링에 데 돈지부 쇼야게 레로 좀리 이제 도지람들라제 두스페유 단다 시종 가르송 유메직 아주 생기다
because of the amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all these major rivers that flows into 10 different countries from the plateau of Tibet. And it's
또 단디 시종게 소야데 벽에 남시레 벽 코유데 다지 제시토다 아니 에시아난 거지 덴자다 덴자 딘딕토라 냥가 거리미 코유단 데토라 다지네든 데토라 카미송데도 데단디가 주 땅시바데 에시아랑 롱팅칸가 태동글레 제데드 시종총게 벽에 단다 자용 상고 춘소토라 땅시 데단 데토니
Indus Valley civilization and the Yellow River and the Yangtze flows into China is two lifelines of China, and yellow is the kernel of
그래서
Chinese
저도 좀
civilization. Then we have the Mekong flowing into
디림픽의 모르디나 이도 좀
Burma,
그
Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and
남시
Vietnam.
디
Five
그다
countries
구유고
in
런시
Southeast Asia.
학과도
And,
버디 점불링
there are
나기다
also Irrawaddy
차그럼
and
때네
Sabine
차세 내
flowing
숨버디
into
지고를
Burma.
인도 좀 추워 먹고 싶지
Karnali, a
중주차돼요.
smaller river
그래서
flowing into
야나다부
Nepal.
차샤비는
Brahmaputra
변에
that
마주베
starts from
정주차가
Western
도
Tibet,
야나기
goes to
간다
Eastern Tibet,
손에
takes a
쪼데
U-turn
차돼요.
and
네 많이
comes
봤다
into
얘가
India
먹고 싶지가
and
나오려야
Bangladesh.
벽이 정주 마
So we are talking
주고 유주
about
잠바
10 different
다가라는 게
countries,
토네
and
변
these
내가 전부
countries
그거
are some of the
차요베디
most densely
견도 요구를
populated
실도
areas
수고도
in the world. So, and unfortunately, China does not share any hydrological data with any of its downstream countries, and none of these countries are able to speak up to China about these issues. So
단다
this is a
자나기
serious
양지 공부 건조기 짬보 튼소 망볼라다 총가 춘조 망보시부 제고요레 아니 로카 망보시부 제고요레 튼소가 땡디 코유라지 뇌전다 휴진 첨부지 태고요데 이나야다 자나기 지 벽이 마니 주비 짱추 첨부 튼소 돌라 가르가르 시기요미기 무 가수그레 니츠 세보지 단잠리 수지라지 건조기 코트 시기요 말에 히에로 시기요 말에 아니 땡디기 지 니츠 세보 메비기 내단지고 월라 망부지기 티톨양지 도선 시기에다 디 강강지 내단 차도 요레세 중송도 할라
and the El Nino effect defines the monsoon
그래서
rainfall
베나
in the
더
region. And
변알이야
as recent as
직카르무
a few
슈제
months
첨부
back, there
차보다
was also a
다네시
scientific study
비긴
about the correlation
다들 캐나
between
도슨들 캐나 수반다시
climatic
지
conditions
짱부진 저
in
톨이야
the plateau of Tibet
디
and the
첨부체야
Amazon.
주라 첨부제 요로.
첨부체야 아니 점린 남시 주도 톨레 슈게 이거 베나 엘니노세 디다 남시 주도기 내가 제주 차대요레 디도 상마 망부지 벽이 런중 구유 내법다 다와 차대요 시티송도
네레
This is a very, very important issue. And geostrategic
다 베덴 자니 토가 네 송바 인세게 던디기 nen가 지인디 다디 제시 톨라 베기 사브기 토냐지 사카 nen가 같이 시미디 시종게
다디네 탑주고 돈에 내가 가져 있는 시종소도 아주 대직 얘기다.
India and China. There was never ever a war between India and China. Only after communist China.
나 탑주기 전에 망돈 탑주고 돈에 내가 전부 그거 차이 사법 정식이 돈에 베나차샤비나 점불링나기 민보 최쇼기 유준이 야가다 야나바라 루규나리아 마답 중요해요 말했어.
Still persist.
이 야가다 야나나기 시버 차번에 쏜데 마답 당부디 야나기 벼 원규 제사회 계기 줄주도 근데 주주를 이거야 마답 주주디 디파도 마답 맞춰야 돼 벼디 반내 계급 dob진 계급 얘기 민보 최쇼니 계급 반내할 때서 내가 되대요 그래서 근데 사법 차단하는 돈에 벼 내가 가지고 있는
Israel and Hamas. And we have followed the policy of middle way.
다단다 시종게 벽 지사북 토네 같은 디지레 이시안 나로로 자크 멤버 체슈 니게 바니지 임바다 아니 바로 파츠 지 마타 모요에 같은 디기네가 차도연 디다 냠돌로 단다버도 범속이 다달 인잔 잠블링 톨 자주게 니스 망부 중고도 아니 벽바 공원이게 세미시위 코난기 뜻이 달랑기 토네 다단다 우메랑기 토네 베자 하카뉴 세트기 디톨 비스난 거에 문티 송고도
much focus on non-violent movements. His Holiness has always been saying that if Tibetans take up violence, he will no more be responsible for.
나 베베 단다 체메시베 탈람기 링크 코널 때네 네 라와 탑주세요. 그래서 니라가 관습경보 정부 초기 가르가나여서 아주 탑주의 체메시고 코네톨 로고 그래서 니 그때 강시 그것을 체메시베 탐사니 먼저 탑주의 정시 작주의 정시가 아니라 집이나 니마 디네스도 관습경보 정부 초 탑주의 우리나야 아니 참사하게 됐어요. 이도 좀 봐. 지 관습경보 정부 초기 간다 그거 칠리카베 우리 니베르 시티 토네 아니 간다보도 탑주의 시티 체메시베 야친데 간다 점불링 날 빼줘 탑주 차대요. 배나 되긴 캐나스는 시를 대산 점불링 날이야. 탑주 먹고 쉬우지. 저쪽이 정시가 지는 예자라다 하마스 이스라엘 바라기 내려주고 되겠다. 저쪽이 내가 배전디
more so in the regions of Tibet and East Turkestan and Mongolia. It's very, very unfortunate. Even in this century, you have no access to Tibet. That's why the United States have this law called the Rata Act.
다들
다 변나로라 지 잠블링게 망보지 미 망보지 로투고요 말아 변나로라 지 상고바다 아니 지자기 미나 망보지 까니 지 부길 파탄지 뇌니 수카리 유미 주네긴 강아지 체진 준 용투고요 말에 델텐신의 아메리카기 다지 판로 총게 증자세야지 덴베시리 데디기 라다 중바이나 데년같이 잡도 세
다들 이 단다들 공원이야 세종고 토마 우주 남백이야 아메리카 디 표현들 내가 제가 숨고 메디다 자와체고 팀이 망부지 팀차장마에 팀이라 템베치지 이제 좀 되게 예셔야 돼. 계급 라다체 팀이나 라다르세야 돼. 판도 총목이 간다. 단념기 통하고요. 아메리게 미세 아메리게 살고바 아메리게 총바 근데 망부 쉬우지 아메리게 그래서 건다 야나게 총바 야나게 살고바 야나게 루투 아니 다는 시사고 망부 쉬우지 아메리게 나 용바 마세 라왕도 통해 가르치는 제주고 디다 초좀 뭐지 아메리게 살고바 아메리게 미세 학바도 디나 가지고 대바 아메리게 미세 되게 되잖아 그래서 표현할 로저가 토단 구구였어 토단 전념 구구였어 디 팀이 때문에 제제다 라다 팀이 차대요 디스고요
Tibetan language has nothing to do with Chinese language. Tibetan script came
그래서 단다 디직생 와시종 담아치는라게 되게 끼고 중국에서래 디 가르치고 나가서 얘기다.
Pali text into Tibetan from 8th century to 12th century before Buddhism vanished from India, and we are proud to be that we are a repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom. So when they are striking at the very root of our identity in the form of boarding schools where you are taught only in Mandarin, now there are only 4 classes. Now we hear that in the eastern part of Tibet, they are going to if this is successful, even a small village, then right, you must have seen there was a symposium of Tibetan academics in China, and they decided to call Tibet Shizang. And this is not just changing the name of a country, it has its political connotations, because when China refers to Shizang, they are referring to only Tibet Autonomous Region, not the other regions of Tibet. So it has a lot of political significance also why China is doing this, and they relegate that to an academic decision rather than a political decision. In fact, they've been using this since 2019. And I request the free world not to fall into the trap of Chinese government's
다들 세종 소야리아 pendant parka purge 총도세지 베진아 초요레 베진아 초바칼리아 우주 체제 간다 시상세야 시상세야 디페초적으로 인지나리아 표세야 아니 아니 고안으로 디지털 고안으로 디지털 진짜 세종을 다 가질 수 없으나 디다민 둘샤고 정말 디 더블로리아 야나 슈기 첩식이 미국 첨부지요 첩식이 미국 첨부대 간다 배우고를 유야기 사실 야나 야나지도 주례기 최시 디다 다고 첨부 쇼지를 이도삼바 점림 미마기 투지 세수 점림 미마기 야나게 천이 디나리아 버주가 나로나스
to make sure that this person will not take up any political activity. And today, if I think about self-immolating myself, I may die, I may get scarred for life, but Chinese government has collected DNA samples of Tibetans, iris scans of Tibetans, geolocation and electronic identification.
Tanda nyanga chi ya de songuda chek sona ji jire tanda de penang la tanda ji muma rali ma su shu ji jongor wala ta ji rali ma su jada chul ha ji kan ji chung cha re ta ta di ko so penang ge memang su ge lingu pe ya la ka kan ji yome kai sana ta jana jung ki toshi de cheta jene ani jana jung ki ta memang tun so ge rizhe tun so duru she mi ji gar gar she ge me gonin ju pa da chama shi ya ge tan ne tan de ji go wala true be should dance in Bernang Pemisogita pitching Gujo Jam Eba Netandago Chai.
Atmosphere of fear, you can't trust anybody. You don't know
딕자도 구유 디데지 볼이야. 진나 슈주 뚜니 펜주 미다 니파랄이야. 신앙기 구유 슈주 뚜니 펜주 이제메 수고레. 이제메 비지도 펜주 이제 제모도 비지도 수고레 송고도 증아도 직 센도와.
But I don't think China is as strong as the rest of the world perceive. They think it's very monolithic, very strong, but there are a lot of chinks in China's armor. In the Politburo of 7 members, where now everybody says it's
tanda di jana chilu gi tatsula jana de peche ji top chendo khaboda ji kanya she the me banda wo ji chilu gi tatsu de ji yode de ngwe so da jana nang gi da chasi gi dongbi re chasi gi wote tu so paru la thapso da kanga kari yo mi ji
that he transferred every single journal every year. So that the journalists don't build better relations with the cadres. That also rules out military coup. And China is the only country that spends more money on internal security than external security.
And the Beijing Yashu Jig Jana Nalo ya and Guji so Lokamadi the Mimali Jek has Yume and Jana Jacob Jujung in Narone. The logic Jujung in Narone.
China wants
but
the
the
Western market, the European market, to have relations with the United States. They need the US Southeast Asia market, but they don't want the free world to come in that region to control their hegemonistic ambitions and the bellicosity towards Taiwan. Some people ask why China is having this belligerent attitude.
Jana gi tanda ji juji lanjik se gi ta tandi ji tanda chonde ji choshin bar wara chi tu gi lenso tandi ji choshin ba ji re ani ta jana gi ji beji bu zam ma re ya ji Taiwan da lo jana jang so so thol ya ji hamse ja ji da lu ge sam to
very severe, then only they might attack Taiwan. Till such a time, I don't see much danger. I'll close here and I'll take questions after this. Thank you very much.
The Taiwan ya namsa de gudong da de Sikyong Penpa Tsering the ine dan de ju de kan de chagi yume Quran securities. Da Sikyong ge chwo na ge dong zo de saying the chwo da ya de ya sargo ba na ga de mo
the chwo tani nani 3D sango pa yo ba che ani tanda ji Quran so gi.
I have a few questions and then we'll take some from the audience as they
come.
So you mentioned the forced assimilation of Tibetan children through state-run boarding schools. In August, the U.S. imposed visa restrictions on Chinese officials for engaging in this forced assimilation. What impact, if any, did that have on China?
The Pernal Yana Sugar Lu Mongo Shuji, Denzel Tango, didn't do it on America, Shugi the Givenalia, and Jimmy Piru Casagelia, Tonje Visa, Tambrache, D. Kayo Layolia, Siju did water, Pendo Carson, the Sijon this thing.
Even though they are barred, but their children are also barred, so they don't want to see their children not being able to join Western universities when they are sanctioned. So it definitely will have an impact, but we'll have to see.
The Sikyong Soya Delia, the visa Chigo Kikemare Penata Dina Rola, America Shungi, Tonje visa, Gautam number, the detailed Tone, Puri Zugo, my Puri Dinzu, the Gautam. Gese Puri Dinzo, American Tone Bell Unit, America Trosham Yungu in Kunjo Budi, the American Lopson Chava Yungu in Chomang Buching, Tobo Yungu, it is about 10 D, the Gautam did the number D, Pento Yunguris.
Well, Radio Free Asia reported on Tuesday that China had banned the teaching and use of Tibetan language in elementary and middle schools in southwestern China, where many people of Tibetan heritage live.
What do you see as the impact and consequence of that policy?
See, the concentration, the large-scale state-engineered concentration camps in East Turkestan was also experimented inside Tibet first. So the Chinese method is to experiment it in a smaller place first, and then if it's successful, then they implement it.
Jana ge kari ni chi chötan da go chi chedi ge re tanda su ju tun so chi sha Turkestan la re Xinjiang se pegile kari chumba du so ngwen ya chi pena la she ba da go chi ani denan shi chi jana ge ki dan tu so ram chami zo ye ki hemba la di ge la ta she ba na shi chi ta pena lo la ti chi le ngwe re se ge
ta bena di Sikyong so chi dis ngwe re ta bena ki yi tol ta ba che no more the penal ta choda di penal che ani dinde 라다
They
샤사디
also
페나
laws
정료미리다
being amended in
위구르다 대조가 지금
another
그래서
part of
생긴다.
Tibet in Qinghai province where they are regulating the use of Tibetan language. So they are doing it in the schools and in the society in the larger framework. So if these are successful, these are going to be very, very consequential because here the Chinese government is not only trying to change Tibetans into Chinese, but you also must have had report about China wanting to call Tibet Xizang.
Yes.
And I urge the media also not to use Xinjiang because that's also a Chinese name for
다들 디 페나 총회 신세도 나라 로소 리든
and that's how China cynicize everything.
그 다가 랑기 레든 지점 뭐지 간다 기주 제디 포경 정보리야 녀석 첨부 소야지래 디마세 다들 권해가지고 감매시분들 시제 조선이라가 내내 발된다 시사세 당연히 좀 맞출 수 있어요.
레레 시장 마체 아니 다 자나기 신장세 츠디오 다지 베시마탄 로시세 근베군다고 지난 것도 다 tin소야 첩시기 nen가다 첩시기 내된다 투디디 재미기 안지 무유 먼저에 셔도
단단히 시경 소야리야 민문에 디샤르도 비슷한 시고르스.
If you keep repeating the statement that Tibet is part of PRC, you're going against international law because the only one agreement that we have with Chinese government is the 17-point agreement, and that was also forced upon us.
단다 시경 소야디 내가도 시경대 아메리카 페야 조직이 간요세 팀차세 주소날 예로 디톨이야 잡조세다 디날 내가 친구지 카리어를 그려였으나 주자 단다 주자 디날로야 팀차차도 디날 카리어서 벼디 루규 돈을 지게 이네 벽에 간요세야 우마마기 털랑도 세고야 디소 리드서 바탄다
아니 베스에 디지 벼초가 숨라 고고요 바지
아니 제가 디 점블링 사르고 버츠 벼디 야나기 차시 인샤지 이제 디티에디 디미들 야나기 차시다 학보도 BRC에서 BRC에서도 삼바 야나 마치도 계급이 차시 야나 마치도 되는 가죠 야나 마치도 계급 쓸줄도 그게 주시 공업주 담배로 신나 고쳐 인도에서 봤다 디 나가지 대 순고도 학보도 단다 디 시종의 소야 직디 간다 그 야나기 차시 인세 벼다 야나 빠라리아 주둔 정말 찡한 직사요디 줄줄도 그게 영업주 머지고로 시작을 주둔
China used to say Tibet was part of PRC from 7th century, 13th century, 18th century. That couldn't hold water, right? Now they say the international community said that Tibet is part of China since antiquity, since time immemorial.
자나기 가두이네지 터히다고 지체지 데 베데 자나기 다치 나가모니 다 차히레세 프랑스구나
part of the People's Republic of China, but it's an autonomous region of the People's Republic of China.
His Holiness never said Tibet is part of the People's Republic of China.
디 저와디 잠서 살고서 고노테로 디 뭘 도슨들 관다 등에 캬 파섬슈스 디네가 지르샤 그래서 살고 저디 겨울미지 네 벼디 벼랑 경조데 견나마 지리 계급이 나호르서 대세경 넘부전에 경고르부지 그 남이야 벼랑 경조데 견나마 지리 계급이 나호르 소녀요 말했어.
So what His Holiness said is, let us leave history to historians.
그 야화임에도 고스경보시 부초기 디 루규기 캐버도 지십전에 이제 스티파샤
committed to saying
that 베란지레다 말에서 디단지 돈내가
I don't ever remember His Holiness saying
이네 경보르부지 그 남이야 벼디 양하게 차셔야 당가 호르스 촌 송요야 말했어.
Going back to again this sort of cultural genocide that's happening. China's own constitution allows its minority populations to speak in their own languages in the regions they populate, so they're violating their own constitution.
tatnenga champonderendoa jana ge tsating nanglo yizung shebaina janyu muru tsog susuge ki da region tonso songcho da manya kombe she todan de teyor de ine jana ge lani ta udi ta tsating da peding ga da cha de yo
시종 가르송도 돼.
So what they say and what they do are totally different.
jana share da la lendra ni
They
bet lo
say
gares.
harmonious society, harmonious neighborhood.
지속 참두다 지속이 튠람 쇼주스 소고요.
Towards the whole region. So you're increasing defense expenditures of Japan. Japan is a pacifist country after
개걸 신다다
Second
툴럼
World War.
제와디
Now
시고래 이내
Kishida
쇼신다
is
찍네
being
근데
forced to spend
일본
more.
지고를
I
믹세
read one report that the defense expenditure of Japan has increased by 11 or 13% over last year. Taiwan has to spend. There's no choice because there's so much aggression from the Chinese crossing over the median with so many jets flying over it and being threatened all the time. Australia is spending $356 billion on 6 submarines, nuclear submarines, over the next 15 years. Then China came out with a map.
피기 나올 자나기 자주를 빼베 오스트레일리아하고 차지한다. 지 추워 몽주
India also as part of
몽부지
China.
수준체하기
So the
베즈는
Philippines,
거를
Malaysia,
되게 스마트하다 투스도
Vietnam, everybody is up in arms.
자나도 년같이
against
신이
China.
받은 문제신.
And of course India, where they claim the whole of Arunachal Pradesh and some parts of Ladakh.
다단다지 대자마제 달로 자나 장소나 자나 그 함생 말에 대마제지 해말레 루지코다지 자가가 사고페나 오르나자 라소 라다지 사고가 히라소 베한 자나 프랑스기 차시 인세기 든지기 야지 니히고요 되게 란심메비 자가라야 야지 답스세나리 진도세메데
never ever respect you. If you
디
keep
디르자 시종가
kowtowing
다르
to the
디스노야
Chinese all
데라
the time,
카신 다들 로
then
아메리카
you become
나라
the
소소와
donkey or you become the pony.
자나
They'll keep riding you.
장화
If you
제가
stand
가려
up for your
수수
position,
랑초다
just like
이제
India is doing
제사의
right
템포
now,
마소
India
보이나
is saying,
자나 그
unless
뒤남이야
there is
투지고
disengagement
지금
from
말해
all sectors,
디
there will
만주
be no
냠명호톤의
normalization
시기요
of relations.
왜 자나다 자와체
China has to
냠명호톤의
respect
시기요
that there's
수수
no
랑초다
choice.
이제 템포 송제
Yeah, and the
대비나
Western
자나가
countries,
지고 지그랬어 디
including
시종
Europe
송수 다들
and
지
here
송고도
in America, I was in Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico over the last few weeks, and there's a lot of Chinese investment there. But if you look at how much China needs you and how much you need China, all of these countries
tanda
have
jana
trade
gi
deficit
kaba
with China.
kasa kala France gu matsa
So
tsudo
I
yorwa
keep
matsa
we
tsudo
have
di
this
jakan
Tibetan
ga shi
expression,
sambala
you
ji
hit the
jana
butter at the stone, the
France
butter
gi jana
loses,
gi
you hit the
jakjo da
first
matsa
stone
tsudo
at the
metu
butter, the
ruwa
butter
ga di
loses.
samsu
But
tu
if
yung
you
si
think
bare
you are the
dönge
butter,
tole zi pa ina
you
jana
will
gi
keep
kran
losing.
ji pa le pa
You
ro pa
have
bu
to
gu
know
dwe
that
jana
your
gu tsu
strength,
gu gu dwe
you have to
digi
stand
ji
up for your strength
ka
and
su
for
gu
the
ji bowa
values
da
that
mano
you
ya da
cherish so
digi
much
denga
here
ma chue
in
ji
terms
shi
of
gwe ge
human
shin bu du
dignity,
su su
freedom,
tengu du su su ro
democracy,
pa
and
de
all
ngone
that.
che gu gu yores
If you don't push that, then China will be pushing its own agenda. Now you are talking about so many of Xi Jinping's thoughts on cultural initiative, global cultural initiative, global security initiative, and some 6 thoughts. It's just latest was Xi Jinping's thought on global cultural initiative. So that is how China is trying to rebuild a new global order where
그다
they
단대
become
주주
dominant
디 내가
and
지금
the rest of
전불린
the
그
free
지소
world
주주 주의
remains
유여 지소
in the
풍자
weaker position.
더부여 디나리아
In a speech
전불린
that
날
you gave in August this
야나기
year, you
믹스에
quoted
사지
from the
지소야
memoir
단
of
지
the well-known
차시
Tibetan
지고를 빼나
diplomat, the late
콜레른
Riley
신기탑에
Rinpoche,
지
about the one China
콜레른
policy.
신기대 돈에
I'm
야나기
just going to
아니
read that
삼르
excerpt.
지조
Basically
삼르
talks
야나
about
말다 시진핑이
the one China policy as a result of
콜레
the United States
릭숑
attempt to establish relations
게
with the
삼수
People's Republic of
삼로세야도
China, while
시진핑이 콜레
maintaining its
된자게
relations
삼주세요
with
간다
Taiwan
야나기
in the
뜨루키
70s,
이제 디 점불링 찔리야
which has no relevance
캡답
to
제약이
Tibet.
디 탑시 지고를 제단디 독선 수지 제고를
excerpt.
이제 송고도
Yet the PRC government vigorously pursues efforts to extend the application of one China to Tibet, and in recent years it has misled a number of governments into believing not only that the one China policy applies to Tibet, but that it restricts the extent to which their government officials can interact with Tibetan leaders in exile,
including
His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
I think people fail to differentiate between the one China principle and the one China policy. Because one China principle is between the mainland China and Taiwan, because both claim as the real rulers of China and that there's only one China. Now, from the Taiwan side, it has diluted over the years since 1992 when Taiwan democratized, and they are no more saying that they are the real rulers of China. So that one China principle is in question. One China policy is the policy of the U.S. government towards China and Taiwan. So you know that President Nixon and Kissinger opened China to the world way back in 1972. And then you have the Shanghai Communique.
Gyana chigi tadrup sayade America da gyana nyambo shani sungdegi da kanda yikcha khashi yore Nixon ka shabada ani Jimmy Carter ka shabada dige khashi yore bana dige dilya kanda rumbo soso gyana da jawa chewa kaliya gyana chig sayage tadrup di thone ani cheyage di yikcha
situation as to how all this principle and policy evolved. And for Tibet, the only agreement that we have with Tibet historically was an independent state. There's no question about it. There is a Chinese professor who wrote about this history. He looked at only the imperial Chinese records from the Yuan to the Ming to the Qing. And he establishes the fact that the imperial China, if you can consider the Mongolians and Manchus also as Chinese, then imperial China never considered Tibet as part of China. There's another book called Tibet Trip 2020 written by Michael Van Wall from Prague and his partner Nick Boltjes. He took a completely different approach. He deliberated with some 70, 80 scholars over 7 years before he published the book 2 years ago. And he established the fact that there is a Tibet-Mongol relationship or Tibet-Ming relationship or Tibet today, Tibet has never been considered part of China. So those things are very important for the international community to understand about
You recently visited the young people of Tibetan heritage in Virginia. How connected are they to their Tibetan roots? And what role does the Tibetan diaspora play in the resolution of the Sino-Tibetan conflict?
Now, in this changing world, we also are facing a lot of social and demographic changes in exile. Earlier, most of the Tibetans were located in India and Nepal. Today, only 60% of the Tibetans in diaspora live in India and Nepal, about 70,000 in India and 10,000 in Nepal. The rest of the 50,000 outside India, Nepal, Bhutan. So we are talking about a lot of young people moving out of the compact communities that has been an instrument for preserving our language, culture, religion, and way of life, because in these compact communities we were able to re-establish many of the monasteries that were destroyed by the Chinese government, and we managed to establish these in exile. So these are the foundations of the preservation of our identity in exile. And now, wherever I go, we have to reach out to more than 25 different countries where Tibetans are located. Many of them are youngsters who come over, moved over, and many of them are born here. Let's say, for the case of the United States, many children. We moved about 1,000 Tibetans in early 90s. Now their born in the United States. So now our job is to get these youngsters have the potential. They have become nationals of these countries, whether it's in Europe or North America, Australia or elsewhere. And they understand the system and they speak the language, so they could be very good advocates for our cause. That's why I make it a point to reach out to the younger generation of Tibetans as much as possible. And we have also created this platform called the Voluntary Tibet Advocacy Group, where younger generations of Tibetans to take initiatives in Tibetan advocacy in different parts of the world. So they are a very, very important component for the future of our struggle. And since we follow non-violence, since we follow negotiated solution that's mutually beneficial and lasting, even non-violence may take longer time, but we believe it could be lasting. So in that case, I think every community have this saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So we are hoping for the best, that we will be able to return back to Tibet as soon as possible when the circumstances are right. But till such a time, we have to continue our struggle. So
그래서
even if
디
we have to struggle for another 30, 40 years down the line,
슌게죠.
then
간다 디
these younger
무티오레스.
generations of
베베
Tibetans are the
탑조디
ones who will be
균종치기를
carrying the
베베
torch
탑조
forward.
디
There
간다
seems to be some level of polarization
니뱅
within the
토네
Tibetan
아니
diaspora,
내전 타조 유하지고
particularly
디아
surrounding
체메시웨
the topic of
프롬
independence
코네
and
톨샤제
autonomy.
디치고레
So
체메시웨
what
탐람
are the
디토네
potential
유르가
effects it
고르시기를
could have on the
이네
cause in the future,
디텐데
and
체메시웨 탐람 토네 준제지 연구를
has it been harder to maintain
템보체 야보
tensions
야보
since
연구를
the
인도도
Dalai
방아도
Lama's
담벨
return
요는데 라와 상서 제리니에서 제세 띵어도
One
지금
thing that I tell,
the-
the one thing that we focus a lot on historical status of
Sikyong
Tibet
Penpa
is also, I say, 4 reasons. One is to send a message to the Chinese government that you cannot change Tibet's history. Because history is history, it's past. You cannot just change it like that. That Chinese government will have to understand whether they like it or not. And even though their propaganda is so pervasive and so intense, we have to work against this because that is not the truth. The second reason why we focus on the historical status of Tibet is also because we want to send this message to the international community that, when we lived in isolation over the plateau of Tibet, neighboring countries decided for us, whether it's China or British India or Russia. Now when we are in exile, the whole international community is deciding for us. Now who are you to decide for us without having gone through the Tibetan history? Understand Tibetan history first and then make your assertion in whichever way you go. And the third message is for the Tibetan people themselves. I tell them, if we don't study our own history, who else will? Unless it's an academic or somebody who is really supportive of us, like Richard Gay here. Otherwise, nobody would study the Tibetan history. And the fourth reason is to bring these two elements together. We have young Tibetans who feel desperate now they want independence and they advocate independence. We have the official policy of middle way policy. Now my take on, I tell my people, whatever policy you follow, it's okay. We follow the middle way policy because that's the official line. But you face it towards China. Whether you
다 디르샤 시경기 내가 전부 수지디 전쟁 시지요. 전쟁 시나는 당부디 야나알야 달렌세오 수시되고 야나알 달렌세오 되고 디 회디 야나기 차시 중요 창요 요마르세디 달렌세오 수지 되고 그래서 야나기 지자 혹시 되냐 뭐 시르선 봐. 즉 회디 당한에 근데 야나 프랑스에서는 나가면 별 야나 샤시 뭐 디시 우리 멤버들 야나 달렌세오 된다 이버들이야 기지 지소 공원에 벼야나게 차세에서 벼 타셔도 기지 지소 제도가 말했어. 아주 벼게 가산 대박깔이야. 기지 지소 아주 벼기 내다한테 그래 이메 타주시고 말아 캡줄 술래 산에 다 벼도 야나게 차세에서 기지 지소 리토단도 요 말을 학벌도 기지 지소기 벼기 내도 균련 차산 매매돈에 타줘도 간데스 제도가 됐어. somebody 디 벼버스 릉이기 벼를 우주셔야 돼 계신 부슈지레스. 디 톤에 전쟁 시바델 하고도 그나 베베 지소가 나올 딱 베베 신경 먹지 그때 야나가 지난 아주 우둔 땅을 안 세주기 생겨. 그럼 시경 프랑스고 탈론 관대 지토를 아주 전에 그게 아주 중글 나줘도 우멜람게 톤에 그게 간요세야 지고 내 란저 중에 이내 아주 합주 카드에 야나 인자 합주의 카파로니 합주 저도 수고 시제 수고도 도중으로 시경 못
for Mexico, let us say China is the second largest partner after the United States, right? But they don't understand anything about China, its intentions, its motivations, because China, whenever they invest, whenever they do large trading, they have a lot of strategies behind that. We have seen it in Asia, what happened to Pakistan with the Gwadar port that has been taken over by Chinese government. By creating dead economies through the Belt and Road Initiative. You have seen Sri Lanka, which had a lot of economic problems, that they have taken over the Hambantota port. With Cambodia is almost 40% in debt with China, so they have taken over part of the Sihanouk port. So these are all part of the Chinese maritime Silk Road. They need these ports for strategic reasons, not just for trade and commerce, but also for more geopolitical reasons. And then you also, China's being able to, the diplomatic coup that managed to bring Saudi and Iran together, that for the Middle East, occupying spaces in Djibouti, other African countries, along the Mediterranean. You have Greece and Italy and Portugal, and last time when I was in Germany,
디
2 months
규지
back, they
람제기
got a
민게
score
토네
on
파키스탄
Amber
알리아
Port.
디
So
마통마 마제
whenever they
민토네
do something,
슈주주 아니
nothing comes
물로
for free.
마도도
There is no
다
free lunch with
파키스탄
China.
기 두고
Everybody
거라
has to
야나기
understand that you will
주
have to
야나
pay
다
back
사오데
in
차다
some
나는
form
스리랑가
or
나리아
another.
니준데
So when
좀벌레
I speak
아니
to,
캄보디아
when I
나로다
spoke to the
다 간다
Latin Americans
디
this time, I said
가소레
we are not asking
로샬
support only
에시아
for the
유리 슈주
Tibetans.
두조 망고다 라오스 두조
If
나로리아
you care for
야나기
your country,
불륜
if
슈지
you
안에
care
뜻자
for
마도가
your
강해
people,
치부
then
슈차데
you should
이래서 막
start
야나
serving China
너무
now,
맞아 주도
otherwise
봐
it will be
야나
too late.
꿀롱 가리메디 꿀롱 가르치는 맞아 주고 이메다
We've been
하고도
doing the rounds
저거
of
다
the
디워신다
capital
스피드 아주
this morning.
디싱긴다
What do you hope to accomplish on your visit to Washington?
Now at least people are willing to listen. We have been going around the world. My predecessors and the elderly generation have been going around the world talking about the reality of China. Nobody listened because everybody was so keen on getting money out of China. They thought they are benefiting out of it. But unfortunately, it's not turning that way. It's turning the other way around. I think the United States also learned it the hard way from 2000 onwards when you talk about the free trade agreement with China. Or during President Clinton's time, China's entry into WTO, and all those developments were the leaders hoped that once the Chinese become part of the global economy or the global society, they would become more responsible. But unfortunately, China has not become responsible in that manner. So the US has learned it the hard way, and now they have been very supportive in those cases. And you have US trade, China trade
지나리아
war
교탄 투고
going
대망주
on.
예배 지소를 교탄 투고를 사회 자와슈 체여로
This time,
레데 간다 니데
we
큐는
here
요금에데
may need to
아메리카
push a
강에
bill
뭐지다 유름 뭐지 야나다 동란
in the
체베 돈의
Congress for the
시내
Tibet Resolve Act.
야나디
Now the
냐마삼로
Tibet Resolve
아메리카
Bill
슝게
as of now.
삼마담바데
So
노아샤
once
삼마데 셔도 좀
it's
벌써 이승고
reintroduced in
있거든
the House and the
America
Senate, we are
naku
hoping
mabu
this will
depth
get
is
through
that
because
dodo.
there will be focus on the historical status of Tibet, and also recognizing that Tibet is still an unresolved conflict or a
다디
dispute.
탄다 아메리카 패 규제 제대 뷰디 두조 나로리아 탄다 침자 요데 뷰디 있잖아 그 차세 많이 받아 그게 내된디 단데 탁저 맞중배 강에 세마도 봐 탁저 맞중 원내대베 내된지 봐 문지 요아기 표주 디 람로 요아 돌이 겸예슈가 패비 있으시도
로직
The Panchen
네도티
Lama
오지
is one of the most important spiritual leaders, second only to His Holiness in the hierarchy of spiritual leaders in Tibetan Buddhism. They both hold the highest decision-making power and on the issue of reincarnation. And each have participated in the process of recognizing each other's reincarnation. The current, the 11th Panchen Lama, he was recognized by the Dalai Lama in 1995 when he was 6 years old. He was abducted just a few days after the Dalai Lama recognized him, effectively becoming the world's youngest political prisoner. Chinese authorities then appointed its own Panchen Lama, Gyaltsen Norbu, who's the son of a Chinese Communist Party member.
Yeah.
And the whereabouts of the real Panchen Lama are not known.
Yeah.
So Dalai Lama is now 88 years old, although he has stated that he may choose not to reincarnate. But what concerns do you have about how his successor will be chosen? If he does win.
China has been thinking about this some 30 years ago. They're waiting for this Dalai Lama to die. With the order number 5 in 2007,
kada maomba nyokta
where
nyokta
the
yoyagi
Chinese government, ethist government, wants to be responsible for reincarnation of what they call as living Buddhas, and reincarnation which is very unique to Tibetan Buddhism, does not exist in other Buddhist communities. I think last year when I spoke at the National Endowment for Democracy, even then I said Chinese made a very strategic mistake by not recognizing the same boy that was recognized by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But the concept of reincarnation itself is very complex. It's very complex. There are a lot of stories behind it. You have to understand the whole gamut of the possibilities of reincarnation. It's not, see, the whole concept is that the person who is going to be reincarnated is supposed to have the power to reincarnate and to carry on the responsibilities of the previous reincarnation. So it's not necessary that you need a Panchen Lama to recognize another one. Now, let's say if there is no Panchen Lama at all, who will recognize the next Dalai Lama? There has to be a system in place, right? So His Holiness has been saying there could be emanation. Because it's His Holiness, and it's His Holiness who's going to be reborn. He is going to decide. And he alone will be responsible for this reincarnation. And people who need designates to find this reincarnation, not the Chinese government. It's not going to be Chinese government. Of course, they will try on their own. But I also say, have you not learned enough lessons from the Panchen Lama Saga? Because you mentioned about the two boys, one recognized by His Holiness, went missing. We don't know whether he's alive or not. If he's alive, he should be 33 years by now. And he has not been, even if he's alive, he has not been given the education to carry forward his traditional religious responsibilities. And then you have the Chinese Panchen Lama, who does not live in his traditional throne in Tibet. But he lives in Beijing. Of course, he has been educated, but he's just regarded as another leader by the Tibetans inside Tibet. If you go to Lhasa today, you won't find the Chinese Panchen Lama's pictures to be sold. You can't sell Dalai Lama's Panchen Lama, so they sell only the 10th Dalai Lama's picture, 10th Panchen Lama's picture to show their displeasure. So none of the Tibetans inside Tibet respects the Chinese Panchen Lama. So whenever the Chinese Panchen Lama, earlier when he came to inside Tibet, they used to pay money to listen to his teachings. Last May he was in Tibet, and this time we found that when he was entering into Tibet from the eastern side, they were given 100 yuan to go and receive him. And when he reached inside Tibet, in the Tibet area, they were given 200 yuan to receive him and listen to his teaching. So they're trying to gain some legitimacy for their own Panchen Lama, but it's not possible. And they sent him to Thailand, they sent him to Hong Kong, but low profile, there was no recognition of any sort because they practice a different, the Pali tradition. We practice the Mahayana tradition or the Sanskrit tradition, and they tried to send him to Nepal. We found that out, and he was blocked from entering Nepal. So where else can he go? Maybe Mongolia, or maybe Kalmykia and Buryat, because Xi Putin relationship is right now as we speak, Putin is going for the BRI conference. And China does not care about the ICC arrest warrant against him. China does not care if it's a law that fits their objectives, they take it as a law, international law. If it does not fit their objectives, it's not a law at all. They can, and being part of the Security Council, they have the veto power. So that is the unfortunate part. Of course, now the message I send to the Chinese government is, do you need a lifelong headache or not? Whereas His Holiness, even now, reassures us that he will live for another 2 decades or more. He will live up to 113 years of age, and there were pre-signed that this Dalai Lama will live very long. So Xi Jinping may not be there at that time. Another 2 decades down the line, he may not be alive. So I tell the Chinese government, do you need a lifelong headache or not? If you don't want that, leave spirituality to the Tibetans.
You feel that these restrictions should be applied to all PCP officials involved in cultural genocide of Southern Mongolians, like in the case of Tibet?
It's all the same. Sometimes we get asked as to why we don't hear about Tibet anymore. That's because of the system, the gridlock system that they have introduced, that Tibetans are not able to do anything. And right now, East Turkestan issue has become more prominent internationally. So I tell my friends, also, it's not a matter of whether Tibet issue is in the forefront or whether it's the Uyghur issue or the Mongolian issue or the Hong Kong question. As long as the perpetrator is the same, it reflects the same on the international community, whether
the
they're
Sikyong
doing it on a larger
Penpa
scale or more intense scale.
It
varies from region to region, but then it is the same government that is applying the same policies and programs to eradicate the identity of the nationalities, of all the nationalities inside China. When the whole world is moving towards multiculturalism, China is the only country that's moving towards uniculturalism. We're talking about Xi Jinping's policy of one nation, one culture. Even religion with Buddhism with Chinese characteristics, Christianity with Chinese characteristics. So all these China's means of eradicating different nationalities inside China.
Would you say the international community has not done enough?
Definitely not. Definitely not. There needs to be much more efforts. I think Europe is waking up, but unfortunately Europe doesn't have a unified trade policy or a foreign policy. So I keep telling them what the colonials used to use against the colonies those days of divide and rule and carrot and stick exactly being used by Chinese against the Europeans. Today, if there is no concerted pushback from China, let's look at Norway, for example, when Norway, when they conferred Nobel Peace Prize on Lushaba, then compared with Norway and China,
Europe Europe nyamre
if there is no concerted effort, then they can really put pressure on smaller countries. Now, Europeans are also waking up. We tell them we need more transatlantic cooperation, not competition when it comes to China. And some Europeans tell me, well, the dragon is biting at us. I said, who fed the dragon to make it so strong? It was the Americans, it was the Japanese, it was the Taiwanese, it was the Europeans. We all were involved in making China big. You don't have to read too many books. Just read Kissinger on China, you will know when China is about to fall, that you put the spirits and make it stand. So now, knowing that China is biting at you, knowing that the dragon is biting at you, if you still keep feeding, then whose fault is it? That is something I think you need to chew on. That's a reality.
This is one of the questions from the audience. The Dalai Lama said a few months back in Dharamsala that he had formal contact with Chinese officials regarding Tibet. What's the current perspective of resuming dialogue with China for resolving Tibet issues? And in fact, what is your strategy for engagement with the Chinese government to seek a resolution?
We do have back channels, but not yet established contacts. So it's too early to talk about any of these when there's nothing to talk about. But we remain hopeful. We have to engage with China. When we follow the middle way policy, I tell my people, when we follow the middle way policy, there is no other way than by reaching out to the Chinese government and seeking a solution. But we are not looking only at short term, we are looking at long term. So it may be immediate, it may not be immediate, but we have to keep engaging. But till such a time that we are able to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict through negotiations, we will have to reach out to the international community. But there also, we don't expect the United States to leave aside their national interest for the interests of Tibet, or India, for that matter, to leave aside their national interest for the interests of Tibet. So only when the interest aligns, then there is a way forward. And right now, under the present circumstances, when the whole world is going in a different way, we don't want to go in a different way. We have to take a holistic perspective of the global situation. And right now, it's very dynamic. It's very fluid. As we speak, things are changing a lot. So we have to see how this new global order shapes up, and all these multilateral forums that are coming up, all because of China, the new ones that have come up. So
제대다 냠돌로 페미초기다 제식으로 로바도 고고요레스 아니 제식으로 로바도 그라그레스나 제식이 지 베게 니드디 세디 제식고 자된다 데와요 반nen가지 차윈디 급드디다 제식으로 오셔봐
이제 하고
냠데용 그래서 냠북토니
final question.
디 요구를
What is
예배네
your biggest
내가
concern
지금
for the
도스서
Tibetan
다
people
점불링
living
기
under Chinese rule?
직 칩시 랑조다
That
또
our
쇼가
identity
또
would be
두어쇼 주고래
completely
이래서 망아도 점불링 기 칩시 푸유다 뜨면서 나가서
You talked about cultural
디다
genocide.
타데 로스
And
나가서
that is
또
a very
투어가로
dangerous
요마레스
thing because we feel that we have a culture, we have a civilization and a culture that has the potential to spread more peace and harmony in this world. We know that we are a repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom that has a lot of relevance to this world. But we try to look at the good side of the bad things, that we lost our country, but the world gained the Dalai Lama. And through His Holiness the Dalai Lama and his messages of peace and non-violence and compassion. But right now we are digressing. I think his messages need to be more emphasized. I think the media also should have more focus on non-violent movements. When you are focusing only on violent movements, then it's more like you're promoting violence, because that is when you get more
visibility.
That's why I want to thank the press club for organizing this.
And I know you're on a very tight schedule, but before we let you go,
다다디
there is a
시종
press club
디피게 담셰디 줍수다
we'd
인데
like
탐에
to
주좀 데
give
가르쳐
you the coveted National Press Club mug.
다다디 시종 제제 그 제제 친구 슈날 때 두두도 하나 봐 도지체 아니 데 아메리게 다다 개용 살고 튼소 아니 믹스에도 찾아주 아니 디프도 주의 있으시죠.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Just a sign, signature.
Yeah, whatever you would like.
답하게 다다 시종기 군주 대직 요래 다디나 비게 중시나게다 델리아
A moment to thank the headliners team, including the headliners co-chairs, Donna Lyman-Leger and Laurie Russo, Cecily Scott Martin, our events
근데
director.
너들 다 주집이나 다른
and,
시종기
Mr.
주주직이
for,
두주디 나로리아
putting this newsmakers event together.
단대표
I'd
내다
also like to
아메리게 부동토리아 격도 가르나 구여와 벽이 끼기 토리아 냠자가 가스칭여와 점불링기 벽 토리아 대주디 자나 모심베 토네 다 구여와 타고도 지지지존에 아니 벽이나 차세르세하게 타쇼디 지주메와다 디게디 내가 아직 못 가실 수
대단량도라 다 제시기 벽에 강아세야다 내든 세토기 토란 당이셔바지 단도 셰요 말에세지 디휴첨보지 소나서 다당이 디삼소 단다 드리 시종기 등차 냥가신 보시부지로라 내남 대무일 진짜 제 둥바나 인사에 오스트레일리아 등차 등지 표현이 급두디 자나가 슝석이 카데그 모고 갈수그래 등지라 등차 테니스네 코란소고 베뇨다 쇼지시 디마 히틴 셰고에 등지게 셰고고레세야 등지 코란소고 쟁고 등지 나레 디 만두와지레 다 달리그 등차 등지 라와다 냠돌 다 산중군게 등소게 시종게 개체와 가르송송 개체와 가르송바디 다 산중게 둥 갈수그래 둥쇼라 제기 등지 내단라 보지
일단 망체 된다 개용 디 시종 폐기유나 디 폐기 단다 빠르 유나 직대로나 시경 폐하게 빠르 유나 직대로나 나 그게 다다디 시경 그게 아주 시슈아 디나로리아 단다 개업기 서고 튼조기 찰레나게 되지 아니 디칠 단다 시경기 차용어의 리처드 기어기 지다 단다 아주 빠르데도 스카데샤 아니 기지변을 요구 가기 겐지 덴절라다 아니 아메리카 구습 튼주 제 호나조 답게 구바줘야 되는 것도 제가 디파르데 라자도 샤나로나 예 단다 내가 아직 가르통 것도 디린 개용 서고 튼조리아 가면아데 남주 이비나 개용 서고 튼조라 가면 나사들 용해 망체 디게디 서고 받아 심주바 아니 중국면에 제도 중국을 유도 잠바 중국민나 디게디 다 시종의 다른 제잖아 차산 제사를 주소고 투미디게 차산 그 제나고 돼 차산 제나 잡을 다디 dom지갑제 선주공에 디게디기 대리 시종고 선버디 누가 가져 총서 군소 고도 가질 렌토도 다디 따야지를 것도
지단 시종게 등디기 등차지 자가이네레 오스트레일리아레 등차 가디 라바이나 까뮤지 나온디디 제시기 도나쇼치 제거도 등차 대자 첨부제 아니 산중근기 쿠란 속이지 고건다고지 차 덴디지 휴첨부지 해단 갈수 그렇지 쿠란 그 송구야 또 메시지 세나레 송구야 또 nen가도 소 참마지 다지 상고바가 하고 토니 단다지 배토야 근데 네 좀하고 연구도 와
라젤
데레 단다 데데 냠돌 단다디 시종게 단다디 자용고 상고 튠소 디토라 드리카 피제 아리를 까메나부터 담보디 사르와라
시kyong penpa tsering la ge thare de geyon tunso nalo changpo sha na geyon tunso nalo la kamyon nangye chik yang ne yang du denshu na ya di lokso shira yo ma re ko di geyon sargo tunso se la cheton changpo shira zigor america nalo di indu zamba chik pyri suwi bi ne de yang se pe ya da de gi 디시라 가서래 로스 디시라 요마래 인도에서 봤다 체동의 비게 페투보다 가면 나디 체동 첨부시라 슈나버스 승부도 아니 시경 같은 가면 나야 디게 디 얘도 스텝이나 즉 코로나고 모르디 시라 튠두 이내 인부하고 요등에 안을 학보도 주어지는 디게 디 깔렌 디게 디 닝보다 디데 저 코피게 저 먹고 싶을 로투야다 디데 요즘 뭐 추주지기 내림날 창만 캡투야요 말디 내가 요바 먹고 싶지
대간라 코란소 태동식도 와라
더 태동디 내가 에시아 라운드 관계 주고를 나와 또세제 나 디도 ngazo page tanda 태동디 사브레 드리 에시아 라운드 관계 벽에 대해서 도스름들다 아니다 이런 거니 대 돈좀 부슈 다나시 노드르말라 ngazo 디 전주관안에 주도한 차로나게 차로디 잘래 남다 아니 템딩원 줄라다 제 아주 바르바 파게 무엇수 단다 개요 설거 tun소들 도 스페제 학벌도 드링에 토지체 주에 지기 단다 아주 주도 찬란나게다 아니 바르디 아주 미얀마 게 대생기 안에 와 아주 잘래 싫어 그래서 차로 싫어 전부 나서 이도 봐 남을 현재 정말 토체 쉬어야다 아니 드링 아주 대동기 레림디 삼발이야 토지체 쉬어야 아주 대동 레림디 제 주리 쉬이